Good afternoon, friends. Well, welcome you on this Sunday afternoon. I'm glad you are here, and some of you are going to join soon. So, today, in this series titled Decoding the Spiritual, we are discussing various subjects which are important in finding God, in discovering the purpose of our life, the meaning of our life. And today we are hitting the bullseye, and we are talking about the this word called purpose. Now, let me begin by making this straightforward statement that human beings are called uh, to live a purposeful life. Well, it almost seems like an obvious statement, but it's it's not easy. If you have been in that journey and if you are human, I think you will agree with this statement that it's not easy to know what is the purpose of my life. And this question has been asked many times across centuries by people of various mental and intellectual capacities. And this question has also uh, led to its own consequences. So, before I proceed further, let me let us hear what people of various kinds have been talking about the subject of the purpose of life. I'm quoting from a gentleman called Khaled Husseini. He says, "The cities, the roads, the countryside, the people I meet, they all begin to blur. I tell myself I'm searching for something, but more and more it feels like I'm wandering, waiting for something to happen to me, something that will change everything, something that my whole life has been leading up to." Well, if you don't identify with that, um, I can't say much, but I can say about myself that um, this is something which I can relate to. This is something which I can relate to when I look back into my life. There is another gentleman who writes a very funny quote, but it's very interesting, and I'll read it for you. I may or may not agree with these people, but still, it's something interesting to note. He says, "Without purpose, we are just good-looking animals." Amazing. I mean, think about it. Cartoonist Ralph Burton, he was very successful and he was in demand, and he took his own life, and he left the his suicide note, and in that note were also these words: "I'm fed up with inventing devices to fill up 24 hours of the day." So the loneliness, the lack of purpose, the meaninglessness, this is not an unusual experience for human beings. Because human beings are created with a purpose, they have a natural quest for that purpose. Mark Twain expressed similar thoughts about the meaninglessness of life in a view of man's inevitable death. Shortly before his death, he wrote, "A myriad of men are born. They labor and sweat and struggle. They squabble and scold and fight. They scramble for little mean advantages over each other. Age creeps upon them. Infirmities follow. Those they love are taken from them, and the joy of life is turned to aching grief. It, the release in bracket, comes at last, the only unpoisoned gift earth ever had for them, and they vanish from a world where they were of no consequence, a world which will lament them a day and forget them forever." Now think of this. This is Mark Twain. Now, uh, you know, man is not created to live permanently in a feeling like that. But the question is, where is that answer? Right? And that's the question which we will attempt to answer today. And of course, the answer which I bring is rooted in the biblical theology, what Bible tells us. And why Bible? That's also another question. Why would I find the answer to this question in the Bible? And the answer is that uh, when I want to know the purpose of something which has been created and designed, then I need to go back to its creator or the designer. So I've talked about it a few weeks earlier as well. That if you sent a gift package, a refrigerator wrapped in a very nice gift package to some of your friends in a tribal area, um, and they would receive the gift, but sooner or later, when you go there and you are inquisitive, how well they are using the refrigerator, are they getting uh, cold drinks and ice, and you find out that they are basically using that refrigerator as a shoe rack. And you wonder how could they use it like that, and the answer is that they could not refer to the owner's manual. They did not refer to the designer of the fridge. So if man is created by someone, and if our life is not accidental, which it is not, and if we have a meaning, and if there is a purpose requires a purpose giver. A purpose requires a designer. So we have to go back to the designer. Who is our designer? Who is our creator? God is our creator. So did our manufacturer, did our creator write some instructions in some book about our purpose? If that was not so, then possibly it would be impossible for us to know the purpose. Then we would be like those tribals in the jungle holding on to the refrigerator without understanding the purpose. Who will tell me the purpose? And the only one qualified is the creator. So is that creator smart enough to write a note to us? And the answer is yes. Bible is the word of God. Bible is written by our creator to explain to us the purpose. If I keep looking elsewhere, you may waste your time. And we are all like, we are human beings. We are like sheep. We tend to go in many directions. We tend to use a lot of our mind. We are very independent, and that independence is a reflection of the way God has created us. But that independence has been given to us to be able to discover God ultimately. So anyway, the point is, let me go straight forward to that point. Like, how does Bible answer this question? Is there a better answer? Or do we always do, for all our life, do we need to keep referring here and there gurus and sermons and philosophies, and do we just keep running in the dark? And the answer is, or do we ignore this hunt, or do we just say doesn't matter? Then, as the quote I read a little while back, we are just some beautified animals. Also, where will you run away from the loneliness which it creates, not knowing the purpose? How can you run away from that? There was this famous ex-Beatles singer Elvis Presley. He wrote a song called "Lonely Man," and I mean, just today I read the song. He was actually a believer, and though he also had a very like any star, he had a very lot of challenges in life, and some of his friends who knew him, they actually tell that he was a lonely man. Here are the words of his song. He says, "It's a lonely man who wanders all around. It's a lonely man who roams from town to town, searching, always searching for something he can't find, hoping, always hoping that someday fate will be kind. It's a lonely man who travels all alone when he has no one that he can call his own." Imagine, with his fame, with his resources, with his fanfare, he still felt that there was no one whom he could call his own. So Waldo Emerson said, "The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it to make some difference, that you have lived and lived well. So we know deep within that we are created for the purpose. Then what's the reason? Where comes that loneliness from? And the answer is, let me go straight to my answers from the Bible, and then we will go back and forth, some more reasoning about it. Bible tells God is our creator. We are created in the image of God. We are created with a purpose. That purpose is uh, to get to know God. In Isaiah chapter 43, verse 7, and this is the hallmark verse every time I think about this subject, uh, because this is the verse where God straight away tells. There are many ways He tells this in the Bible, but this is one of those dogmatically straightforward statements. This is God talking. And He says, everyone who is called by my name, and whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. So here He says, everyone whom I have created, whom I have called by my name, I have created them for my glory. In Revelation chapter 4, in verse 11, this is the a scene of the end, the heaven, the ultimate. In this scene, uh, all people around the place, angels and everybody present in heaven, they are singing a song, and in that song they say, "Worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and all things exist for your good pleasure." So we have been created for God's pleasure. We have been created for God's glory. Now, what does that mean? Now, that sounds a little bit odd. When I first heard it, I actually, debated it in my heart. Why would somebody want me for his glory? That almost sounds selfish. Until I understood, until I had to kind of research this subject, read more in the Bible, understand the heart of God, understand the nature of God, understand the plan of God. And this is it. See, we the story is not about me. I think we have to come to the grips with that fact. The answers which we are looking for, they will not be found until I am in the center, because the story is not about me. Let me quote, if you probably you have heard this quote, William Shakespeare, the famous quote. Well, I hope I have it, but even if I don't, well, you have. He said, "All life is a stage, and we are the actors." And I don't believe like exactly this way, but that's an amazing quote. Like there is a drama, and there is a director, and we are actors. We are playing our scenes, and that's how Shakespeare philosophized it. Now there is a it's not to say that we don't live life of our own. It's not to say that we don't have a free will. Of course, Bible is very clear that God has given man free will. We are responsible for our decisions. We are responsible for our choices. We are responsible to have our vision of life. And God does want us to have families and jobs and accomplish things in life and build things, all of it. But we are not the center. It's not our story. It's not our stage. We come to the our acts, we come to that scene in which we are to play the role. We speak, like the actors have certain amount of liberty, even though the script writer has written the script, but the actors use their creative liberty. And that's how life is. Like there is an overall script, we are part of it, we are also independent to make choices. But if our choices are aligned to the story, then the scene becomes beautiful, and that's amazing. And that's why we need to every human being needs to come to this point, like to get to know who God is, to find him personally, to discover a personal relationship with God, to hear from him, his purposes for my life. And and until then, because man has fallen, the relationship for which he was created with his heavenly father, that is broken. What happens is that there is a hole within the human heart, and whatever man tries to do to fill that human heart, these stories of loneliness and meaninglessness which you hear, they they are a result of that hole in the heart. And that hole cannot be filled by anybody else or anything else, but that hole can be filled by discovering this relationship with your creator. So we were created for his glory. Now let's understand, like, what does it mean God's glory? What does it means God's pleasure? It's about a relationship. God loves us. God has a magnificent uh, character. He is the best. He is beyond our imaginations. He You can imagine the most romantic, most glorious story possible in this whole world. Multiply it million times, and that's our God. That's who God is. He is amazing. He is beautiful. But until we only reflect about him based on who we are, based on this sinful world. So we don't fully comprehend him, and that's why we need something like the Bible, where he has revealed himself. And when we read the Bible, it feeds our reflection about God. And once we get to know God, once we are growing in knowing him, that's that's something happens. You know, we we grow in this relationship. We feel inspired to align to that plan. We feel inspired to talk to somebody else about this God, because how he is so lovely. He fills us with meaning. He fills us with that satisfaction. He talks to us and he guides us. And if he is like, he's a father like that, and I was lost and I have found him, then it inspires me to reveal him to others in my own way. I don't know how, but every human being has that opportunity, because he's like a treasure which I have found. And how can I not let others who haven't found him not to have him, right? So another thing, remember, the life which we live. I mean, we heard Mark Twain say that, and many others. There's almost like a sense of shortness about this life. However, I mean, somebody may live till 90 or 100 at best. But from human perspective, somebody who has lived 90, it looks big. But if you ask that man, from his perspective, life was very short. And he knows he's going soon. It's eternity. There is something beyond this life which is eternity. It will never end. Human beings, every human being will live in eternity. Every human being, every human spirit which was ever born, they will live in eternity. There is a heaven and hell after this ends, and this is too short, but that is too long. And it's amazing that every human being has been created by God to live in heaven, to live in eternity with him. Some of us will will lose the opportunity, not because God wanted us to lose, but it's because we are probably arrogant. We are probably not willing to listen to him. But he wants us all in heaven. Bible tells us the way. Bible tells us that Jesus Christ, in his awesome love, in his awesome character, he prepared a way which is beyond human understanding. We can't even grasp it. Why would God become a human being, limit himself, live 33 years here, and then hang on a cross? Wasn't there a better way for human salvation? But this is how Bible tells. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever may believe in him may not perish but have everlasting life. That's what we were created for. That's what we are longing for. That's what everyone needs to come to terms with. And um, you know, uh, another thing, another phrase in the book of Psalms in the Old Testament, many times the author of Psalms uh, uses this phrase. He says, make your face shine upon me. He prays that kind of prayer. It's almost like a smiling face of God. Like deep within us, all of us have a desire that God would smile at us. But we have guilt. We are sinners. Our motives are tempered. We know it. We feel the guilt. So, how can God smile at me? How can God make his face shine upon me? How can God say, well done, my good and faithful servant? Right? And that's a deep desire within me. And that can only happen biblically, it can only happen by faith. It is only by faith that man can please God. So, this is an invitation from God. This emptiness, this lack of purpose is an invitation from God to put your trust on Him. And as you put your trust on Him, you are fulfilling His purpose. You are glorifying Him. You are bringing Him pleasure. And since you bring Him pleasure, He smiles at you. And this is the kind of life every human being is called to live. Now, I'll be closing in a few minutes, but before I close, and I'll next week we will continue a little bit, and we will move from the issue of purpose to the issue of meaning. They are slightly different issues, and we will take this next week. But there is a gentleman called Rick Warren. He wrote a wonderful book called "The Purpose Driven Life." In fact, his title is subtitled with this statement: "What on earth am I here for?" And he writes, "We are not completely happy here because we are not supposed to be. Earth is not our final home. We were created for something much better." Right? So, this longing within us for more is because we were created for that more, and that more is eternity. William Lane Craig is a theologian, and in his book Reasonable Faith, he writes, if there is no God, then man and the universe are doomed. Like prisoners condemned to death, we await our unavoidable execution. There is no God and there is no immortality. And what is the consequence of this? It means that life itself is absurd. It means that the life we have is without ultimate significance, value, or purpose. So, some of you, some of us, I was like in that place someday, we may think, oh, who cares about these things? I am I'm more interested in my job. I'm interested in my business, my earning. I don't even know whether God exists. I'm okay with my rituals and my religious system. I don't need to really have a personal relationship with God. Listen to me, and notice William Lane Craig's statement. This renders your life meaningless. This renders sooner or later people who get into depression, loneliness, uh, taking serious steps about life. This is where they begin, because that if we are not created for this, if there is no God, then everything is meaningless. Then meaningless becomes God. If there is no God, then there is of course no heaven and hell. But that's all a lie. There is truly a God, and there is truly a heaven and hell, and we are truly created for a purpose which is eternal. What we do here on earth matters in eternity. And I'm not talking in terms of religious acts, I'm talking about everything. Our life, I put it in this way. If you are a movie watcher, you when you open your Netflix and you are selecting the movies, while you are making the selection, there is a minute or 2 minutes glimpse. That's called a trailer, right? And and from that you actually judge how is this series or movie going to be, and then you invest your few hours based on that glimpse, right? And so those few hours, like a few minutes represent those few hours. And this is how our 70-year or 80-year life is. This life is supposed to reflect into eternity, and this is almost like a rehearsal for eternity. Thousands and thousands and millions of years we are going to live in the presence of God, or absence of God in some cases, I hope not. And we are going to be there. We are going to live out this character which God helps us acquire here through eternity. That's amazing. And this is an opportunity. This is why this life makes sense. This is why knowing the purpose of life makes sense. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote a book called The Brothers Karamazov. Here is a statement from him. He says, "The mystery of human existence lies not in staying alive, but in finding something to live for." And that's what I would like to encourage you today. A couple of more quotes from Mr. Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life. I would highly recommend that book if you are new to this faith, or if you are still exploring the truth about God. Purpose Driven Life will really, as its title suggests, it's a wonderful book. I will recommend it to you. He says, if not to God, how do you discover that purpose? Because when you are in a relationship, when you are to glorify God, it will come from knowing Him, it will come from speaking to Him, listening to Him, it will also come from surrendering to Him, being willing uh, to let yourself off from the center. Like, this is amazing, because we are created for a relationship, but in that relationship there is an order. God is the center. I'm not the center. I'm His image, I'm His son, I'm His child. But you know what? When I first felt a little bit hesitant about this line, that I am created for God's glory, I struggled with the concept. And is God selfish? Is God proud? Why would He create me for His glory? And I felt a resistance within me, because I was living that life where I was the center. I wanted the life to be around me. But God says, no, I mean, it won't work that way. It cannot be around you. It has to be only around Him. So I thought about it. If I enter a plane and a pilot says, I will sit on my seat, you can sit on any other seat, but my seat only I will sit. It won't be wrong, right? If my father said in my home, I am the father, it won't be wrong. You can't be he is the head, right? And if in a class the teacher would say, I am the teacher, none of you can be teacher. The class will go the way I lead it. Won't be wrong about it. Likewise, it's not wrong for God to deserve the glory, because He deserves the glory. He's not, if He does not demand it, if it was not about Him, then it would have to be about somebody else. And if somebody else in this universe took the place of God, this universe will get destroyed. This universe will not remain, uh, you know, carry that potential which it carries presently for eternity. So it's amazing. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors and philosophers, he wrote this statement in the book The Weight of Glory, and uh, he says there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as a life of a gnat, but it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. This does not mean that we are to be perpetually solemn. We must play, but our merriment must be of that kind. And it is, in fact, the merriest kind, which exists between people who have, from the outset, taken each other seriously. No flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. What Mr. C.S. Lewis is saying is, uh, is that uh, think of the world around us. Think of the people whom you will meet in your life. Think of the people whom you will relate to. You have been placed here for a purpose. You you have you have a potential to have an impact in other people's life, and I hope that we are all learning to uh, to lead others to the wonderful God whom we have discovered. We can't do it. It's not a marketing plan. It's not a selling a product, but it's a gesture of friendship. It's a uh, gesture for God's glory. I hope you enjoyed this. I uh, for me, these words which I'm saying are prayers for me and prayers for you. Next week we'll talk about meaning of life. Until then, have a great week. Thanks for joining in. God bless you and take care.